Hi folks, today's video is going to be all about how to add suspense to your game. If you're running a horror campaign or one-shot, or even in a regular tabletop campaign, you may be looking for ways to really build up the suspense of your game. Suspense is such a critical ingredient in horror or thriller genres. It's that excited, anxious uncertainty about what may happen next. And before I get into the ways, I do want to note that you should think of building the suspense in your game not as like a single ascent, but that there should kind of be little peaks and dips. Think of it as like building up and then letting off a little bit of pressure, not all of that, so that your players don't explode. In horror movies, it builds up slowly to that climax, but it starts out with some smaller scares and kind of slowly builds. And after each scare, there's often a little bit of a lull. Sometimes that release can be a jump scare or a comedic moment, but I will advise not using too much of either of those in your games, or it ends up kind of becoming silly slapstick Scooby-Doo instead of like scary thriller. If you're new here, I'm Dawn and this is Roll for Initiative. We make videos about tabletop RPGs and our other geeky interests, so make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss any of our upcoming weekly videos. So how do you do this at the table? Here are 8 different ways. First, don't use maps. This might be a little controversial, but as soon as you put down a map on the table, your players are going to, intentionally or not, start thinking more tactically. And with suspense and thrillers, you want them more in the moment. Additionally, using maps can reveal too much. Remember that with suspense and horror, we want to preserve uncertainty. So if your players can see the entire haunted house, or even seeing the miniature that you place down for the monster, removes a layer of that uncertainty. Additionally, there's not an opportunity for your characters to become lost if that's an element of your game. My second tip is show don't tell, and let your players fill in the details with their imagination. This isn't to say don't describe the setting or the monster, but give them some details and not all of them. I like to especially focus on sounds, smells, and tactile senses. These help immerse your players in the world while giving them plenty to fill in with what they or their characters would find scary. You can even describe how something makes someone feel, just don't tell your players how to play their character. So, for example, I might describe a scene as you approach the door. As you get closer, the stench of rot and decay grows stronger. The doorknob is painfully cold as you grasp it. Then you feel more than hear something slam against the other side of the door. You can also borrow something that a lot of Eldritch Horror does well and describe what something isn't. You can't quite describe the creature in front of you. It moves like a panther, but its skin undulates in a way that neither flesh nor fur could. My next tip piggybacks on that second tip, and that's to give small details that kind of foreshadow what's to come. Little things that indicate something's off here. A drop of blood on the floor, scratch marks on the inside of the door, an icy handprint on a window. This signals to the players that something's not quite right, but doesn't give them enough away that they know what exactly to expect. Fourth is roll initiative early and have a few rounds where the monster doesn't appear. Things can still be happening during those rounds. Maybe there are lair effects or smaller things that are kind of creeping out. Maybe the monster is still taking its turn and things are affecting the players, but it hasn't fully appeared yet. This is really going to build that tension for your players specifically as their characters are waiting for when combat is really going to start. A big thanks to all of our patrons, especially Sean. If you want to help support our channel, you can head on over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative and check out the perks of being a patron. Okay, let's get back to the video. Fifth, give your players something to achieve beyond surviving or defeating the monster. It adds one more aspect to the game, a level of difficulty where the monster is suddenly another hurdle that you have to get past in order to achieve what you need to do to succeed. Next, add a ticking clock element. Have some kind of time limit for the party succeeding. This can be something that is in-game. For example, you have X amount of time or rounds to survive the monster's pursuit and escape the dungeon before it collapses, trapping you inside and potentially killing you. It can also be a real world time limit. This is especially great if you're running a convention type game. Let the players know that they have, a 4-hour time limit or whatever it is, and that if they don't succeed in that amount of time, they will fail. And you can link that to an in-game reason. So this is really going to ramp up the tension and suspense for the players. They won't be able to take the time to really think things through and will often lead to them impulsively reacting, which is how characters act in a lot of horror and thriller movies. They'll be constantly thinking, if I take my time here, we may run out of time later. My next tip is to have your players make rolls, but don't tell them what exactly it's for. This is especially great using percentile dice. And this could be for sanity checks if you're running a game with that mechanic. It can also be if the character has a special ability where something could go wrong, like with wild magic surges, or for example, like not a horror game necessarily, but Sam's character in the current Critical Role campaign, they have a roll, and each time it gets a little harder to succeed. This is especially effective if the player doesn't know exactly what is going to happen or why they're making the roll. You can tell them, okay, this time you need to make a 95 or lower. Next time, a 90 or lower. So this is going to indicate like things are going to get harder as we progress. This builds the suspense for the player. And you can potentially have this like reset after that bad thing goes off. I've also been in a game where the players made these kinds of rolls, and if we failed, the monster showed up. So if you're doing this kind of thing, there's clearly something that would kind of trigger for these rolls, like if the players are doing something that would draw attention, they're making a lot of noise, they're turning on a light, something like that. So this is going to put your players in situations where they're going to have to make the hard choice of risking attracting attention, and if they succeed on the percentile dice, they know that, okay, there's this kind of moment of releasing the tension, it's worked this time, but also realizing that next time it's going to be harder. So do we do the thing that might speed it up or make it easier and risk attracting the attention, or do we take longer or maybe not succeed on this thing and live a little bit longer? And finally, use your voice to set the mood. In a previous video about how to run horror games, you can go check that out once you're done with this video. We talked about setting the mood with lighting and music, but a lot can be done with your vocal choices. Speak a little lower and quieter. It will make your players need to lean in to understand what is going on. You can build that tension with your voice and even do scares vocally. Okay, so how about you? How do you like to build suspense at your table? Do you use any of the tips that I've mentioned, or do you have alternative methods to really amp up that tension? Let's chat more about it down in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye!